We've got breaking news out of the NFL. 49ers quarterback Mac Jones will make his third straight start and fifth of the season on Sunday night against the Falcons. Brock Purdy, who's been dealing with turf toe-like injury, has been ruled out. He will miss his fifth game of the year. Purdy put in several limited practices this week, but was not cleared to start against Atlanta. Jones, in the meantime, has had success in his 4 starts this season. He's gone 3-1 with 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Unfortunately for Mac, he'll be without wide receiver Ricky Pearsall. He's going to miss his 3rd straight game with a knee injury. Taking a look at the notable Week 7 injury report, Puka Nacua up at the top. He will not play in that London game against the Jaguars. Sean McVay did say he's optimistic about Puka post-bye week, but nothing for him this Sunday. David Njoku, meanwhile, Dylan Gabriel is going to have to find a new target because he is out dealing with a knee injury. A trio of wide receivers and tight ends, if you will, pass catchers for Washington set to miss potentially some time with Terry McLaurin out, Deebo Samuel questionable. A lot of implications for fantasy teams, for just fandom in general. So let's break down some of these notable injuries from a fantasy standpoint. We've got our guy Adam Aizer joining us to talk about maybe some replacements we should be making on our fantasy team. And it all starts, of course, with that quarterback news, Adam, that we just got. It is Mac Jones in, Brock Purdy is out. Give us the fantasy implications here if you have either of those guys on your team.
Yeah, I don't want to start Mac Jones. You know, he's a little turnover prone, and the Falcons look like they have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Just look at what they did to Josh Allen. So it's not going to be an easy day, but there is a pretty big fantasy impact here with Mac Jones as a starting quarterback. Now, George Kittle's expected to play, so keep that in mind. However, remember, Jake Tongas, he has 18 targets in his last 2 games, and it hasn't stopped Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne has gone for 142 yards in 2 straight games with Mac Jones. Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne, they played together on the Patriots. They're playing together now on the 49ers, and that appears to be his guy. So I am still going to start Kendrick Bourne as a wide receiver 3. He would be a wide receiver 2 if Kittle were not coming back. But this is such an interesting game. Can the 49ers do what they do against this team? The Falcons give up the fewest passing yards per game in the NFL. The 49ers throw for the most passing yards per game in the NFL. I'm going to say it's somewhere in the middle, right? It'll be a good, not great game, but plenty of targets to go around. So Kendrick Bourne's a wide receiver 3, and Mac Jones is a sit.
Falcons, 49ers, Sunday Night Football this week at 8:20 Eastern. A bit of more breaking news we had earlier in the day, Adam. CeeDee Lamb is expected to play on Sunday for the Cowboys against the Commanders. It's been fun. I'm not going to lie. I just told our Garrett Podell it's been fun to watch George Pickens sort of blossom into the wide receiver 1 that we expected to see when he was with the Steelers. But I am just curious, Adam, how that dynamic maybe changes from a fantasy standpoint. I've got George Pickens on my team. He has been hooping. How much of that production, though, is going to drop off with CeeDee Lamb now back in the mix?
Yeah, to be determined. You know, the Cowboys are perfect for fantasy football. They have a great offense and a bad defense. This total in this game is about 55 points. And I could see it going over that. So what I'm saying is this. If you are nervous about George Pickens, his target share was not over 17% in either of the 2 games with CeeDee Lamb. Let's see what happens this week. I am treating all 3 of their pass-catching options as absolute must-starts. CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson. If something happens this week where Pickens' target share goes back down to about 17%, then we can adjust going forward. But I think we're going to get 40 or more pass attempts. I think we're probably going to get at least 8 targets. Let's say 7 targets for George Pickens. And the way he's been playing, by the way, he leads the NFL in end zone targets, and he was leading the Cowboys in end zone targets even with CeeDee Lamb. He doesn't need that many targets to come through. So if you have George Pickens, if you have Jake Ferguson, keep them in your lineup. Start everybody on Dallas. This is going to be a shootout.
Okay, this makes me feel good because Jake Ferguson is a absolute has to be on my team every single year for fantasy football. So that sounds like it's going to be a good duo this week. On the other side of the matchup, though, the Commanders dealing with some wide receiver pass catching issues of their own. We know Terry McLaurin is not going to play. He's been dealing with an injury. Deebo Samuel also listed as questionable there. So kind of a reverse question. We've got the wealth of riches for the Cowboys, maybe not so much for the Commanders this week.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I expect Deebo to play, and that's not based on any insider knowledge or anything. But remember, he was questionable going up to the game last week, and he ended up playing. He wasn't practicing. So I have a feeling he'll play. If he does, you start him because, again, this is the matchup of all matchups. Playing guys against the Cowboys is as good as it gets in fantasy football. Sorry if you're a Cowboys fan out there.
Oh, but yeah. Coming from a Giants fan, what a comment.
Sorry, not sorry. But in terms of the other options, I think it's really going to help Zach Ertz the most. And then after that, we always talk about Luke McCaffrey, but he barely plays. Chris Moore is the guy who plays the most when Terry McLaurin is out, but he doesn't usually get targeted except for last week when he had a good game. So I guess I would still go with Luke McCaffrey if you were desperate. I'd really want to stay away from the Commanders' wide receivers. Ertz would be a must start. Ertz is probably close to a must start with McLaurin out. And if Debo's out, then he's definitely a must start.
All right, let's talk about another wide receiver in Puka Nacua. There was like a sliver of hope that he was going to be able to go back into the game last week. He tried to give it a go, but just no good. So he is not going to be available for the Jags, or against the Jags, I should say. He plays for the Rams, but against the Jags on Sunday. Give us the fantasy implications when it comes to replacing Puka Nacua.
Yeah, there's no replacing Puka Nacua, right? But you can try with Tutu Atwell. And this is a week where you've got no Chris Godwin and no Emeka Ibuka. You've got injuries at wide receiver really all over the place. We already talked about McLaurin. You got no Garrett Wilson. So if you look at these guys who are barely rostered and have a chance to contribute, where are you going? Who are you targeting? I think Tutu Atwell is my favorite. He is a big play machine. He doesn't get targeted much, but when he does, he makes it count. Last year, he had the 7th highest explosive play rate among all wide receivers with 50 or more targets, just behind Puka Nacua. And he's facing a Jaguars team that's very good against the run, but they do give up a lot of big plays. That seems to be their Achilles heel. They give up explosive plays in the passing game. So there's no slam dunk replacement wide receiver, whether it's Josh Reynolds or one of the Bucs guys or whatever. But I think Tutu Atwell would be my favorite. I hope you don't have to start Tutu Atwell. I'm not expecting too much from him. For example, I'd start Kendrick Bourne over him, but there are worse gambles that you could make.
All right, keeping an eye on Tutu Atwell. I got to see if he's available. Let's talk about the Panthers' current running back situation. And this is such a good problem to have, Adam, because Chuba Hubbard kind of did what Rico Dowdle is doing this year, last year, to earn the extension. He has been out for a couple of games, so Rico has really popped off, as we've seen over the last 2 weeks. But now you've got two capable running backs in the backfield who can be explosive. Both of them like finding the end zone. They kind of play similar as well, too. If you, let's say, are a fantasy owner named Haley that happens to have both of these guys on your team, do you give a lean to one or the other? Do you play them both? How on earth do you handle this running back situation in Carolina?
I would not play them both. So here's the first thing to know. First thing to know is that the few games, I think the 2 games prior to Chuba Hubbard's injury, the split was getting closer to even. And in fact, in the first half of week 4, it was almost exactly even in terms of carries. Rico Dowdle has been the 3rd down back the entire year. So that will continue, I would assume. And I think he will have more catches than Chuba Hubbard. I would not play Chuba Hubbard. Rico Dowdle, I'm going to look at my lineups because I have him in a bunch of leagues. So in one league, I am going to consider him over Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs. That's going to be tough, but that's where I'm at. Like, those are good options, and so is Rico Dowdle. In one league, I started him over Chase Brown. Chase Brown scored about 11 or 12 PPR fantasy points. I'm hoping Dowdle can do better than that. This other league is my easiest call for Rico Dowdle. I'm starting him over Tony Pollard and RJ Harvey, right? So I still like Rico Dowdle as a borderline top 24 running back. I think the Panthers are going to win this game against the Jets. I think they're going to be very run heavy. I think that those two guys could combine for 26 or more carries, and I think you could get more than half of them going to Rico Dowdle, especially first game back for Chuba Hubbard. This guy has played so well. He needs to be on the field. He was good for the Cowboys last year. He's good for the Panthers right now. I was nervous about him overtaking Hubbard before the injury, so I definitely favor Rico Dowdle, and I think he's a number 2, maybe flex, but I'm going to say number 2 running back.
All right, I'm going to lean Rico. I'm looking at the rest of my lineup. I've got Tyler Algier, and then I've got a handful of guys that I don't care for in terms of fantasy. Ollie Gordon is my other option, and then Bucky Irving. So we're going to go with Rico. I'm trusting you, Adam, to get this win this week. Let's keep the running back conversations going with DeAndre Swift. He has been so much fun to watch in Chicago. He's really helped bring some life to Caleb Williams and the rest of this Bears offense, but kind of dealing with a lingering issue, something Ben Johnson says it's not a new injury, but it's just something that he maybe retweaked here. So when you hear that it's a lingering injury, how much does that impact your decision-making from a fantasy standpoint?
If he plays, I'm going to start him. It's really just a matter of what happens if he doesn't play. How much are we going to like Kyle Monangai? But for DeAndre Swift, I am starting him. In fact, if he plays, I would start him over Rico Dowdle, who we just talked about. I think he's the best running back in this game. A word of caution, though. DeAndre Swift, in his tenure with the Bears, he just averaged 7.7 yards per carry on Monday. He has averaged more than 4 yards per carry in consecutive games once. So he has teased us with the Bears, right? He just hasn't been that good of a running back. Furthermore, the Saints, you might think they have a terrible run defense. They actually don't. Something like 4.1 yards per carry allowed to running backs. So it's not that great of a matchup. Still think he's a guy to start because whether it's rushing yards or receptions, I think he'll rack up the fantasy points. If he misses the game, Monangai would be really interesting. I'd say tough to trust. I think you'd see more of Roschon Johnson than we'd want. You heard everything I just said about Rico Dowdle. I think I would start Dowdle over Monangai if DeAndre Swift were out. I wouldn't be. Sometimes a running back gets that opportunity and we're gung-ho about it, like Rico Dowdle. This wouldn't be that. This would be more like a Michael Carter, Bam Knight situation for me. I wouldn't be all in on Monangai.
All right, so we're still leaning Rico Dowdle. I love to hear that. Last one for you, Adam, before we let you go. David Njoku's been ruled out with a knee injury. We know that he's kind of been Dylan Gabriel's security blanket through these first couple of starts here. This tells me one thing. It's got to be Jerry Jeudy's week to break out in fantasy, Adam.
Oh, man. I hope so. I think I'm going to start him in a 3-receiver league with a flex that's PPR, kind of deeper rosters. Other than that, I don't really want to start Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy versus Kendrick Bourne would be pretty close. They're in that number 3 wide receiver range. It's really going to be Harold Fannin that gets the big boost here, we think. Everybody in the FFT world, Dave, Jamie, Heath, I think they're all pretty high on Harold Fannin. I am as well. You should definitely start Harold Fannin if you have him. Now, if you have him in George Kittle, then no, don't start him. If you have him in Trey McBride, no. Tyler Warren is very close, but I would stick with Tyler Warren. But Harold Fannin is going to get the biggest boost. After that, hopefully it is Jerry Jeudy. But when Njoku was out in the fourth quarter last game, it was Harold Fannin's time to shine, and he was really, really good. So that's who I think really benefits from this. They've got a great matchup, but I do think they're going to run the ball very successfully and may not have to throw that much. Fannon's great. Judy's okay this week.
Okay, that does not make me feel good. Jeudy has been okay for me every single week, but we'll see if we can get just a little bit more than okay from him.
It will be his best game of the season. It will be his best game of the season.
That's still not saying much. We certainly appreciate the time breaking down those injury concerns when it comes to fantasy football. Adam and the crew keeping you up to date all day, every day. Scan that QR code on your screen to hear the latest Fantasy Football Today conversation.